The U.S.'s tack in this conflict is they don't want to get any deeper involved than they already are. 2,000 U.S. troops is enough, and that's been enough for Donald Trump to try and ratchet up the pressure on his administration to get America out of the Syrian civil war, out of the conflict, and wrap up the campaign against ISIS and get out of there. Just within the interagency in the U.S., in the State Department, in the Defense Department, there's been a serious question over what type of control Russia has over the conflict. Do they have control over the Syrian forces? Certainly in the U.S. government, there's not a feeling that they have control over the Iranian forces that have entered the country. So you have to look at how the U.S. is viewing this conflict and how they're viewing Russia's role. They don't see that Russia has much control over either of these forces. There's certainly concern on the U.S. side about this escalating and about this problem getting solved. But this is an area where the U.S. doesn't have a significant presence. The U.S. has a significant presence in the Northeast. They've already moved their aid out of the Northwest. And the Southwest, beyond some of their basing along the Iraqi border, which is further away, it just isn't a huge area of presence. So the question for the United States is how hard are they going to push on this? Can they do it politically? What levers do they have to pull? What we've seen over the past few weeks is reporting out of Washington, specifically from the Defense Department's own Inspector General, saying that these negotiations and the potential of Turkish incursion, as well as the U.S. thinning out its forces, has been a real distraction and has limited the success of the ISIS fight, as the U.S. still looks to roll back the caliphate and the remnants of that group after victory was declared last year. What you saw with the rise of ISIS was that the U.S. pieced together a coalition, which was eventually more than 80 countries, to deal with that threat. So trying to get other partner nations to contribute troops, to contribute money, to make sure that the U.S.-held areas in Iraq and Syria may someday be able to resurge and rehabilitate themselves. So not necessarily a project to deal with the ideological component, but really trying to focus on how you carry that military campaign out to success, and then how the partnered governments then can look at stabilizing those regions and those countries, but still a difficult task ahead. The U.S. is really looking at a future strategy that's focused on Russia and China, and they're trying to figure out where you can get the resources for that, measuring down the counterterrorism mission, taking American troops out of Syria and Iraq. So those are going to be really the first places where American power actually recedes in terms of the counterterrorism fight, and that is a really big challenge for Washington right now. How do you fight that counterterrorism fight and make sure that allies are not deterred by, as you said, a long-term American presence, and simultaneously shift those resources towards the China and Russia fights in the future?
Would you give us sort of a thumbnail summary of that particular conflict?
Sure, Olivier. The thumbnail sketch is this. Basically, Turkey sought to buy an air defense system for a long time. They'd been in negotiations with the U.S. to buy the Patriot missile system. And then in 2017, those negotiations really fell apart, and they turned towards the Russian S-400 system. Now, the problem with that system is that U.S. officials really worry that it could be used to snoop on the F-35 with its radar capabilities that are pretty strong and pretty significant. So from the beginning, the U.S. had warned Turkey not to buy the system. NATO had also warned Turkey that the system was incompatible with their other weapons systems and wouldn't fit onto the same network. But Turkey pursued this path all the way until July 13th, when they took delivery of the system. And over 40 days ago, the U.S. decided to kick Turkey out of the F-35 program because of those surveillance concerns. And so now here we are kind of in this limbo with a key American ally in the Middle East and broader Europe potentially not being part of U.S. weapon systems and potentially being technologically shifted aside from the alliance.
If you're a soldier out there fighting ISIS or the Taliban, you're in Afghanistan, Iraq, you're constantly taking subconcussive hits. If you're firing anti-tank guns, you're taking blast waves from IEDs, car bombs, car accidents, or just slamming into the ground. This is a highly physical and intense form of combat. And it's been very difficult for physicians to really figure out what's going on neurologically with these troops, because these symptoms don't manifest much differently from a lot of different issues. You can have dizziness or fatigue, headaches, nausea, so things that overlap with different problems.
Your piece reaches well beyond Turkey, though, to look at the ramifications for other allies, other partners. Talk to me about that.
Right. So DoD is worried specifically about China. China has been expanding its tentacles into arms markets around the world, mostly with their cheap drones. So the DJI drone is a popular variant. Other drones that are being sold to U.S. allies and can beam information back to China. And then, of course, you have companies like Huawei, ZTE that offer extensive surveillance packages that might be attractive to countries with authoritarian leanings. So the U.S. is really worried that you might have the same situation with Turkey and the F-35 in Middle Eastern countries and countries in South Asia, countries around the world that China's invested in, where the operational security of American systems is now threatened by Chinese snooping, Chinese surveillance, any of these systems that are coming in. And the message here basically is simple, trying to replicate that message that the U.S. sent to Turkey for the last 2 years. You can have American systems, you can have Chinese systems, but you can't have both.